and millions of dollars to the FCC over the last few years simply because the FCC deems what Howard Stern is doing indecent. And as a matter of fact, Howard Stern takes great pains not to curse on the air. I mean, he does obviously deal with indelicate situations. But why should, Infinity have to pay that money to the FCC? Under what rule or regulation? And by the way, the enabling legislation that the Federal Communications Commission uses, that original 1934 legislation and all its amendments, doesn't say anything about indecency. It talks about obscenity. So in all fairness to Howard Stern, he's never been obscene. Maybe he's been indecent. Who knows what that means? But as you may know, Howard Stern is leaving broadcast radio, and he's going to soon be on Sirius Radio, which is a satellite system. And this sort of ties into something I mentioned before. I'm concerned that the FCC and Congress, emboldened by their recent moves and falsely thinking they have some kind of mandate from the American people after the last election. It's not clear what that election was about. I don't think anybody has a mandate. But I'm concerned that the next step that we'll see is Congress trying to enact laws that regulate cable and satellite. Because that's the way it is with censors. They can never censor enough. They have an endless appetite for control. Because what they really want to control, I think, is the whole world, and they pick on the easiest thing to control. So Howard Stern's story may not be over yet. We'll see how he does on Sirius Radio. I predict that within a couple of years, we're going to see the government go after Howard Stern on Sirius Radio as well. Yes.
Using the word obsolescent the way we would, fluent kind of sense, where when something becomes obsolete, it doesn't disappear, it multiplies. Would you say that censorship today is obsolescent?
I'm sorry, the question is, is censorship obsolescent, the things it censors, or is censorship becoming obsolete?
Is censorship or control, has it become obsolescent?
No, unfortunately not. I mean, the whole point of what I've been saying is it seems to be in a renaissance, in a new ascendancy. There was far less censorship in the United States in the 19th century. In the 20th century, there was a lot of censorship, and now we're up to a really bad start in the 21st century. So, in terms of the historical flow, I think we're not seeing it become obsolete.
Obsolescence doesn't mean disappear, it means multiply.
Yeah.
You've got multiplication of censorship.
Well, listen, I don't want to get into a discussion of McLuhan, but I don't ever remember McLuhan saying that you use the word obsolescence to talk about something that's multiplying all over the place. I think what he was saying is when things become obsolete, they quietly multiply. My point is there's nothing quiet or obsolete about censorship. And if you want to talk about McLuhan's tetrad, the censorship that's now going on is in the intensification or amplification stage. Yes?
Something that I was just kind of, when I was listening to you speak, you said 50% of high school students don't believe in the need for the First Amendment. That made me think back to Neil Postman's Technopoly, specifically where he said that we are creating a generation of children that will have vast amounts of skills but no loyalties and be willing to use them on anybody. And that's my question. How do we make the First Amendment relative and real and vital to a mercenary generation?
Well, that's a good question. One of the problems is people don't think that something is necessary until they see the impact of its loss. And at that point, it's often too late. However, I don't think I agree that we live in such a mercenary generation. A little historical perspective sometimes helps media critics and helps, I think, temper their point of view. For example, if you go back 100 years, 120 years, you'll find that there was just as much commercialization in the 1870s, 1880s. There were ads in all the newspapers. There were things called trade cards. In fact, I've been collecting these for years, where you'd buy a product and get like a little sort of postcard thing, and kids would collect them and put them in their scrapbooks. And they were for soapine, you know, new kind of detergent, and pocket watches and all kinds of things. So, in terms of our capitalist culture and the Industrial Revolution, it is true that the information revolution picked up from the Industrial Revolution and has continued that commercialism, but I think it's not true that it's something that was created in our information age. But the last part of my answer to your question gets back to human rationality, and it also relates to what Lewis was saying. According to Jean Piaget, the child psychologist, he was a great child psychologist. When he was 3 or 4 years old, he wrote all kinds of books. No, I'm only kidding. According to Jean Piaget, kids have adult intelligence, cognitive abilities when they're 12 years old, which is much younger than most people would tend to think. This doesn't mean that a 12-year-old knows more than a 30-year-old, but then again, a 30-year-old doesn't know as much as a 60-year-old, and so on. But if that's true, and Jean Piaget had a lot of evidence to show that, well, that shows that that the same rationality that Jefferson believed in, and of which I was referring to, that children can be appealed to on that level. And for younger children, it requires parents to be on top of their game and talk to their kids and get them aware of these important issues. Mark.
You dangled September 11th out there, and if you look at some of these issues that you bring up, it seems that it's always comes back to a no ordinary times kind of argument. And it's September 11th, from the Smith Act to the Pentagon Papers and Brandenburg in Ohio and all sorts of cases that follow. Are there problems with clear and present danger, or our understanding of clear and present danger and incitement laws, which if September 11th once again makes these no ordinary times? We remember Ari Fleischer saying we should watch what we say. Of course, who knows what ordinary times are anymore. Are there problems with our definition of these things which allow these changes and these floutings of the Constitution to be enacted?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. It goes back to that 1919 decision. What did Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. mean when he said speech and print that provides a clear and present danger to life, limb, or property? What did he mean when he said Congress not only has a right but an obligation to stop? Well, he gives an example. We've all heard the example: shouting fire in a crowded theater. Now, I'm not in favor of shouting fire in a crowded theater, but I have a far better remedy than, actually a series of remedies than what the 1919 Supreme Court did. First of all, build theaters and public buildings in a way that people can run out of them and not trample each other. How's that for an idea? Media colleges should like that. It's a technological solution. Secondly, education. Teach people not to just respond to what they hear and blindly act on it. That's good advice in any case. In other words, that 1919 decision, once again, as so many other decisions in this area demonstrate, that decision has contempt for human rationality. It says that given words, they also came up with the phrase fighting words, and later Supreme Courts outlawed various aspects of what they called fighting words, meaning you can't say something that's going to provoke someone else to action. Well, how about a society in which our kids are brought up not to respond to words with fists and physical actions? Is that too much to ask? And I think that if we had a society like that, then this whole clear and present danger thing would disappear, because in the end, I think that there are no words. There is nothing printed that can provide a clear and present danger. There's nothing wrong with stopping a clear and present danger to life, liberty. What's a clear and present danger? Somebody pulls out a gun and aims it at someone. That has to be stopped immediately and completely. That's a clear and present danger. talking about that is not. And that's what the problem is. And that's why it gets back to John Adams' ass. Who cares what his actual ass looked like? What was important are that those words, written and spoken, became enough of a pretext for the people who said and wrote those to be arrested back in 1798.